I woke up choking on my tea, and when I looked up, she was smiling. That's when I realized the girl my husband hired to take care of me wanted me gone. My name is Margaret Holloway, but everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 68 years old, I have a limp in my left leg from an old fall, and I spend most of my days reading books and staring at the rose bushes I once planted with love. At least I used to, until my life turned into a story I never could have written. It all started when I slipped in the shower and fractured my hip. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to make the doctor insist I have full-time help while recovering. My husband, Harold, was worried sick, or at least he looked it. "I'll take care of everything, Maggie," he said. "Just focus on healing. I'll find someone trustworthy." And he did, faster than I expected. By the next day, he introduced me to Isabel. She was in her mid-30s, quiet, polite, and extremely observant. She barely spoke unless spoken to. She never smiled with her eyes. And the way she looked at me, like I was a test she didn't want to take. The first week I chalked it up to nerves. Maybe she was just shy. But by week 2, things felt off. Isabel would bring me tea but forget to sweeten it every time. She'd rearrange my pills and insist I must have already taken one when I hadn't. Once I caught her in my bedroom drawer. "I was just organizing things," she said, smiling tightly. My drawer didn't need organizing. And that smile, it wasn't polite, it was controlled. One afternoon, I was resting in the sunroom, the doors slightly cracked open. That's when I heard her on the phone. She has no idea. I swear I could spit in her coffee and she'd thank me for it. He just wants to keep her comfortable, but not for long. I held my breath. My mind raced. Was she talking about me? Who was she speaking to, and what did she mean by not for long? That evening, I told Harold. I expected him to be furious, to fire her on the spot. Instead, he rubbed his forehead and sighed. "You're under stress, Maggie. Maybe you misunderstood. I know what I heard. You've been tired, medicated. Maybe it was just a bad dream." I stared at him. That was the moment I realized something even more terrifying. He didn't believe me. Or worse, he didn't want to. After that, things escalated fast. My favorite ring went missing. My soup started tasting bitter. My cat Daisy suddenly wouldn't go near Isabel. One night I woke up in a panic and found Isabel standing in my doorway, just watching me sleep. She didn't flinch. She didn't explain. She just turned and walked away. The next morning, she brought me flowers. "Thought you might like some cheer," she said, her voice syrupy. They were lilies. Funeral lilies. I decided to take matters into my own hands. When Harold left to run errands, I searched Isabel's room. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, but then I found it, tucked in a notebook beneath her mattress, an old photograph. It was dated 1994, a man standing beside a woman smiling. Harold, much younger, holding a baby girl. The woman wasn't me. And the baby, she had Isabel's eyes. 5:15, doubt creeps in. I sat on the edge of her bed, heart pounding. Was it possible? Could Isabel be his number? He would have told me, wouldn't he? We'd been married since 1997. If this photo was from 94, he must have been seeing someone else right before we married. The timelines matched too well. And the look on his face in that photo, it wasn't casual. He looked proud, like a man holding a secret. Suddenly her glares made sense, her cold tone, her hidden anger. She didn't see herself as a caregiver. She saw me as the reason she and Harold had no life together. And maybe in her eyes I was. But none of that justified what she was doing now. The manipulations, the poison of silence, the quiet revenge she seemed to be enacting right under Harold's nose. That afternoon I collapsed in the sunroom. My chest tightened, my throat itched, and my vision blurred. When I came to, Isabel was beside me, smiling. "You should have told me you were allergic to lilies," she said sweetly. "So dangerous for someone your age." But I wasn't allergic, not to flowers. But I was highly allergic to shellfish. And I remembered what the soup had tasted like the night before. At the hospital, they ran tests. The doctor returned with a concerned look. "Mrs. Holloway said your blood showed traces of shellfish protein. Have you had any recently?" "No," I whispered, not knowingly. "You need to be very careful. It could have been fatal." That night, as I lay in the hospital bed, I replayed every suspicious moment. And one thing became painfully clear. Isabel wasn't just angry, she was dangerous. If he wasn't protecting her on purpose, then he was doing it blindly. Either way, I was completely alone. She wasn't just the maid. She was the daughter he never told me about, and she wanted me gone. The hospital released me 2 days later. The doctor gave strict instructions: no stress, plenty of rest, and someone trustworthy to help me at home. I wanted to laugh. Trust. That word had become a cruel joke in my house. When Harold picked me up, he was quiet, too quiet. No "how are you feeling?" No apology, no talk about Isabel, just polite tension. Like we were two strangers sharing the same air. That night, after Harold went to bed, I pulled the photo from my pocket. I'd taken it from Isabel's notebook and slipped it into my robe at the hospital. It still smelled faintly like lavender and dust. The woman in the picture was young, beautiful, with long brown hair. And Harold, he was grinning. I waited until morning. Waited until we were sitting in the kitchen drinking tea and pretending to be normal. Then I slid the photo across the table. "Do you want to explain this?" His face changed immediately, color drained, his hands trembled, and his eyes darted to the door. "Her name was Lucia," he said quietly. "We were involved before I met you. I didn't say anything, just waited. She got pregnant. We were never married. She didn't want help. She said she'd raise the baby alone. I didn't know where they went. I looked for them. I swear I did." I stared at him, cold and still. "And you're saying Isabel is that baby?" He nodded. "She found me last year, said her mother had died. She didn't want money, just time." I let his words sit in the air like a fog. "So you hired her to live in this house? With me? Without telling me? I thought it would be easier if you didn't know." "Easier for who, Harold?" He looked down. No answer. It wasn't just betrayal. It was years of silence, rewritten with selfish intention. He didn't want a daughter. He wanted to ease his guilt. And now she was living in my house, feeding me food, arranging my pills, standing over me as I slept. That afternoon, while Harold went out for groceries, I slipped into his study. If Isabel was his daughter, there had to be proof. And sure enough, inside a locked drawer in his desk, I found it. A birth certificate. Name: Isabel Marie Carter. Father: Harold Francis Holloway. Mother: Lucia Delano. My name didn't belong anywhere near that paper, but the paper explained everything, including why she hated me. The next few days were terrifying. Isabel's smiles became colder. She fluffed my pillows too hard. She served me cold food. She never looked me in the eye. One night, I caught her staring at a framed photo of me and Harold from our wedding. She was holding a knife. "Nice dress," she said. "My mom used to wear something like that." Before your name replaced hers, I didn't respond. I just stared at the knife in her hand and said, "You can put that down now." She did, eventually, but the message had already been delivered. I reached out to Lucia's former neighbor, someone who knew her well. She confirmed what I suspected. Lucia always said Harold walked out on her, promised to come back, but he never did. She raised Isabel alone. That girl had fire in her, but something dark, too. That something now lived in my home. I began documenting everything, took pictures of my food, kept a log of every pill I took, recorded our conversations on my phone. Not because I wanted revenge, but because if something happened to me, I needed someone to know the truth. One night, I pretended to fall asleep in my recliner. Isabel came in with a cup of chamomile tea. She watched me for a moment, then reached into her pocket and dropped 2 small white grains into the cup. I kept my breathing steady, let her walk away. Waited 15 minutes, then poured the tea into a glass vial I had hidden under the blanket. The next morning, I drove it to a friend's lab, asked for a favor, and that favor might have saved my life. Because the results that came back? Sleeping medication, heavy dosage, enough to make someone black out for hours. I realized then that I wasn't crazy, I wasn't paranoid, I was being hunted in my own home. I watched her stir something into my tea, and that's when I stopped being the victim and started planning her end. After the lab confirmed what I already knew, I didn't cry, I didn't panic, I called a locksmith, then I called my lawyer. Because if Harold wouldn't protect me, I'd protect myself. My lawyer was stunned. "This is serious, Maggie. Do you want to involve the police?" Not yet. Not until I had enough to make everything stick. I needed the full picture. Not just to escape, but to expose what they were doing. We updated my will, froze access to my accounts, filed a private security alert to the local authorities in case I went missing. And then I returned home. With the locksmith's help, I had a lock installed on my bedroom door while Isabel was out. When she returned, she stared at the door. "Planning to keep secrets from the help?" she asked sweetly. "No," I said, "just protecting myself. You understand, I'm sure." She didn't answer, but her expression said everything. That evening, I sat Harold down, laid out the lab report, the audio recording of her threats, and the hidden photo. His hands shook, his eyes welled, and still he tried to defend her. "She's hurting, Maggie. She's been through so much. So have I, Harold, at her hands. She just wants to be close to me. Then she can be close, just not in my house." I gave him a choice, her or me. He stared at me for a long time, and then he said nothing. He stood and walked away, not toward me, not with me. He went upstairs toward Isabel's room. That was the moment I knew he had chosen the past, the guilt, the secret, the child, and I was no longer his priority. The days that followed were tense. Isabel began slamming cabinets, breaking plates, and accidentally unplugging my medical equipment. Harold, meanwhile, avoided eye contact. He ate with her now. Didn't ask me how I was feeling, didn't notice the bruises on my arm from her grabbing me. Or maybe he did, and ignored them. But I wasn't staying silent anymore. I installed a hidden camera in the living room, another one in the kitchen. I kept my phone recording in my pocket whenever I moved around the house, And then I waited, because someone that angry eventually slips. And sure enough, one night as I passed by the hallway, I caught her muttering in the dark. Maybe once she's gone, he'll finally stop pretending she matters. It was all I needed, but fate gave me more. That night, I drank from the water glass beside my bed. Moments later, my chest began to tighten. My fingers tingled. I pressed the emergency button under my pillow, one I had secretly installed. An ambulance came within 10 minutes. At the hospital, the doctors confirmed deliberate drug exposure. It was on record now, with a police report, a toxicology report, and my entire house wired with surveillance footage to back it up. When I returned home 2 days later, police officers followed me. They confronted Isabel calmly. She didn't flinch. She didn't deny it. She just said, "I thought he'd finally love me." And then she looked right at me. "You ruined everything." She was arrested on the spot. Harold didn't speak. Not to the officers, not to me, not even as they took his daughter away. Later that evening, as we sat in silence, he whispered, "I thought I was doing the right thing." I looked at him. "For who, Harold? For me, or for your guilt?" He didn't answer. And I didn't need one, because sometimes silence speaks louder than any confession ever could. I gave him 30 years of my life, but in the end he chose a lie, and I chose to walk away. The days after Isabel's arrest were quiet, too quiet. Harold stayed in his study. I stayed in my room, and the air between us, once filled with shared laughter and morning coffee, was now full of regret, silence, and the unspoken truth. We were never going back to what we were. I gave the police everything, the photos, the audio, the footage. Isabel was being charged with attempted poisoning, assault of a dependent adult, and unlawful possession of medical substances. She wasn't sorry. She never cried. She never asked to speak to me again. And that was fine, because I had no more words for her either. 2 days later, Harold knocked on my door. "Maggie, I never meant for any of this to happen, but it did. She's my daughter, and I was your wife." He looked down. "I didn't think she'd take it this far." "That's the problem, Harold. You didn't think." I told him I needed time, away from the house. He offered to come with me. I declined. "This was supposed to be our quiet chapter," I told him. "Instead, it's become my escape." He didn't argue, maybe because he knew deep down he'd already lost me. Before I left, I wrote Isabel a letter. I never sent it, but I needed to write it for me. "You didn't have to hurt me to be seen. You didn't have to hate me to find peace. If you had come honestly, I might have loved you like a daughter. But you chose war. And in war, no one wins." I moved into a quiet retirement cottage on the outskirts of town. Nothing fancy, just peace. No locks on bedroom doors, no poison in the tea, just birdsong, warm soup, and my own 2 hands to care for myself again. A month later, Harold visited. He looked thinner, paler, older than I remembered. He brought daisies, my favorite. But the moment I saw them, all I could think about was Isabel's funeral lilies. I took the flowers politely, but said little. "Are you happy?" he asked softly. "Not yet," I replied. "But I'm not scared anymore, and that's something." He nodded and left. 2 weeks later, I updated my will. Everything in my savings, my pension, my jewelry would go to charities, libraries, and shelters. Not to Harold, not to Isabel. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it to remind myself that I could still write my own ending. I received one final call from the detective. Isabel had taken a plea deal. She would serve time in a medical facility, not prison. Harold had tried to visit her. She refused to see him. She blames him now, the officer told me. Says he abandoned her twice. Sometimes at night, I still think of that photo I found, the one with Harold and the baby. I wonder what would have happened if he had told me the truth. If Isabel had walked through the door with honesty instead of resentment. If love had been enough. But stories don't rewrite themselves. And people who hide the truth eventually choke on it. I may be old, I may be tired, but I'm not broken, not anymore. He thought hiding her would save him from the past. But the past always comes back, and it came through my front door with a smile. Now I sleep alone, but I sleep in peace. And peace is worth more than love built on lies.